I was ashamed to show my boyfriend to my parents and friends because he was a blue-collar worker, but years later I knew exactly who became the real success and made serious money. Hey Reddit, my name is Maya, and I need to tell you about something that happened to me recently that completely changed how I view my past relationships and life choices. There's something incredibly attractive about dating someone who works with their hands. At first, it was ridiculously hot in a way I had never experienced before. Derek would come home from construction sites with concrete dust still clinging to his hair, and these incredible forearms that looked like they could single-handedly rebuild an entire building. Honestly, they probably could have. I'll never forget watching him fix my broken garbage disposal in less than 10 minutes, working with this quiet confidence that made everything look effortless. Meanwhile, there I was standing next to him with my advertising degree, thinking about how I would probably just Google garbage disposal repair and then end up calling a professional repair service anyway. The contrast between us was stark, but at the time, I found it endearing rather than concerning. We met at my friend Jessica's birthday party 4 years ago, and he immediately stood out from every other guy there. While all the other men were wearing expensive polo shirts and trying to look impressive, Derek showed up in this simple black t-shirt that somehow looked better on him than designer clothes looked on anyone else. There was something authentic about his presence that drew me in immediately. When he told me he was a construction worker, I thought it was refreshing and different from my usual dating pool. All the guys I had dated before were these corporate types who were constantly talking about market penetration and brand optimization, wearing expensive watches they had bought on credit to project an image of success they hadn't quite achieved yet. Derek talked about concrete mixing techniques and foundation issues with the same passion, but his interests felt more grounded in reality. He had these rough, calloused hands that made me feel things I didn't even know I was supposed to feel in a relationship. The first year we were together was absolutely incredible. He would pick me up after work in his old pickup truck, this weathered Chevy that smelled like sawdust and energy drinks, but felt more authentic than any luxury car I had ever been in. We would drive up to the mountains just to watch the sunset together, and he knew all these secret spots around Miami that you would never find unless you had grown up there. Unlike me, who had just moved to Florida for work, Derek actually belonged to this place and could show me the real version of it, not just the tourist attractions and trendy neighborhoods. I felt like I was discovering the real Florida through Derek's eyes, not just the sanitized tourist version that most transplants like me experience. But then reality started creeping in, the way it always does when you're in your late 20s and everyone around you is getting serious about their careers and life trajectories. You know how it is when you reach that age where social pressure becomes more intense. Everyone I knew from college was getting promoted to senior positions, buying new cars with their increased salaries, and posting pictures from weekend trips to Key West and Orlando that seemed effortless and expensive. Meanwhile, I found myself bringing Derek to Jessica's engagement party and watching him stand in the corner nursing a Corona, while everyone else engaged in animated conversations about their latest client presentations, startup ideas, and career advancement strategies. It wasn't that Derek couldn't contribute to these conversations or lacked the intelligence to participate meaningfully. The problem was that he simply didn't want to engage with that world. He would just listen with this half-amused smile on his face, like he found the whole social performance amusing rather than important. Somehow, that detached attitude made everything worse for me. I wanted him to care about impressing my friends or at least try to fit into my social circle, but he seemed perfectly content to observe from the sidelines. The money situation became increasingly complicated and strange as our relationship progressed. On paper, we were making almost exactly the same amount of money, which should have made things simple. I was pulling in around $60,000 annually as an advertising coordinator, which sounds decent and respectable until you factor in the harsh reality of my student loan payments. Those monthly payments were basically like paying rent on a second apartment that I never got to live in, $480 every single month for the next 9 years, thanks to my very expensive piece of paper that supposedly qualified me to write email campaigns about products that nobody really needed. Derek was making decent money in construction as well, but here's the part that really stung. He actually got to keep all of his earnings. No crushing debt hanging over his head, no monthly payments to some faceless loan servicing company, just straight-up cash that he could spend on whatever he wanted or save for his future goals. The financial freedom he enjoyed while I struggled with debt from my superior education felt like a constant reminder of a choice I was beginning to question. The absolute worst part of our relationship became introducing Derek to my college friends. They would always be polite on the surface, of course, but I could see them trying to figure out what exactly I was doing with him. Jessica would ask what Derek did for work with this carefully neutral tone, and when I would say, construction worker, she would get this particular look on her face. like she was trying to solve a complex math problem that simply didn't add up in her worldview. Then she would inevitably launch into some story about her ex-boyfriend, the consultant, or her husband, the architect, as if she was trying to remind me of what kinds of men were supposed to be appropriate for someone with my education and background. I would stand there feeling like I needed to constantly defend my relationship choices to people who were supposed to be my closest friends, explaining why Derek was actually intelligent and ambitious, even though he didn't have a college degree to prove it. The final conversation that ended our relationship happened on a Thursday night in February, and there was nothing particularly dramatic about it. No big fight, no shocking revelation, no moment of crisis that forced everything into the open. We were just sitting on my couch after dinner like we had done hundreds of times before. Derek was reading some construction magazine, completely absorbed in an article, while I found myself scrolling through LinkedIn, looking at all these success stories and career updates from people I had gone to school with. As I watched post after post about promotions, new job opportunities, and professional achievements, I felt this growing sense that Derek and I were simply heading in completely different directions in life. The realization had been building for months, maybe longer, but that night it crystallized into something I could no longer ignore. I just looked over at him, so content with his magazine and his world, and told him honestly that I thought we wanted fundamentally different things from life and our futures. Derek wasn't surprised by what I said. Maybe he had been waiting for this exact conversation just as long as I had been dreading it. He simply nodded, closed his magazine without any drama or protest, and said okay in this calm, accepting way that somehow made everything feel both easier and more final. Just like that, he got up from the couch, walked into the bedroom, and started methodically packing his belongings. What struck me most was how little stuff he actually had at my place. 4 years of being together, of building what I thought was a serious relationship, and everything he owned that mattered to him fit neatly into just 2 duffel bags and his toolbox. As I watched him load everything into the back of his pickup truck, I felt this weird mixture of relief and panic washing over me simultaneously. Part of me felt like I was making a huge mistake and the smartest decision of my life at exactly the same time. He hugged me goodbye in that genuine way he always did, told me sincerely that he hoped I would find whatever it was I was looking for in life, and then simply drove away into the night. The entire breakup process took maybe an hour from start to finish. No screaming, no tears, no desperate attempts to salvage what we had built together. Just a quiet acknowledgement that we had reached the end of our road together, and it was time to move on to whatever came next. Derek's side of the story. Hey, this is Derek, and I need to tell you my perspective on what actually happened between Maya and me, because there were things going on that she either didn't notice or didn't want to acknowledge. Maya started pulling away from me emotionally about 4 months before she actually ended our relationship, maybe even longer than that if I'm being completely honest. The signs were all there if you knew what to look for and were paying attention. I could see it in the way she would physically tense up whenever I mentioned anything about my work, like I was telling her about some embarrassing hobby instead of describing how I spent 45 to 50 hours of my week earning a living. I noticed how she started finding reasons not to bring me around her college friends anymore. There was always some convenient excuse about how the gathering was just going to be boring work stuff, or how I probably wouldn't be interested in whatever they were discussing anyway. She would say it casually, like she was doing me a favor by not subjecting me to their conversations, but I could tell she was really protecting herself from having to explain me to them. The thing is, I actually genuinely liked Maya's intelligence and sharp mind. That's what drew me to her in the first place at Jessica's birthday party. I loved watching her talk passionately about some advertising campaign she was working on, seeing the way her whole face would light up when she got excited about a creative idea or strategic concept. She was incredibly sharp, way sharper than most people I had met in my life, and she wasn't afraid to show that intelligence or let it shine in conversations. But somewhere along the way during our relationship, that same intelligence that had initially attracted me started feeling like a weapon that she was pointing directly at me instead of something beautiful that we could share together. What had once been an asset to our relationship became a source of tension and judgment. I've been working in construction since I was 20 years old. I started right out of high school while all my friends were heading off to college to pursue their degrees and follow the traditional path that everyone expected us to take. My dad always told me that there's real dignity in honest work, and I believed him completely then. I still believe that fundamental truth today. There's something deeply satisfying about building things with your hands, about taking a project from initial blueprints and architectural drawings to something real and tangible that people can actually use and live in. That process feels infinitely more meaningful to me than pushing papers around a desk all day or writing emails about products that nobody really needs. Yeah, I heard Maya complain about those exact emails more than once during our relationship, expressing her own frustration with the meaninglessness of her daily work. By the time we moved in together, I was making decent money in construction, around $58,000 annually, which isn't nothing, especially when you consider that I didn't have to pay back some bank every single month for the privilege of learning how to do my job. Maya was constantly stressed about money, always calculating exactly how much she had left after making her student loan payment, always talking about how expensive everything was and how hard it was to get ahead financially. Meanwhile, I was actually putting money away in savings every month, thinking seriously about maybe starting my own construction business someday, maybe buying some property and building equity instead of just paying rent forever. But somehow, in Maya's eyes and in the eyes of her social circle, I was the one without ambition or drive. I was the one who lacked vision for the future. The absolute worst part of our entire relationship was watching Maya be genuinely ashamed of me in social situations. She would never say it directly to my face, of course, but I could see it written clearly in her facial expressions when she had to introduce me to her friends or colleagues. I could see the way she would hesitate for just a moment before telling them what I did for work, like she was hoping they wouldn't ask the question at all. The way she would overcompensate afterward was even more painful to witness. She would launch into these elaborate explanations about how creative construction work actually was, or how important skilled trades were to the overall economy, like she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince them. It was like she was building a case for why dating me wasn't actually a step down from her expected standards. I tried really hard to be understanding about Maya's situation and the pressures she was facing. I genuinely did my best to see things from her perspective. I knew she was under intense pressure from her friends, from her family, and from whatever vision she had constructed in her mind about what her life was supposed to look like based on her education and career expectations. But it's incredibly difficult to love someone deeply when you can constantly feel them looking down on you, when you know in your heart that they think your work and your life choices are somehow less valuable or important than theirs, simply because you don't need a college degree to do what you do well. That constant judgment wears you down over time, no matter how much you try to ignore it or rationalize it away. The night she finally ended things between us, I was sitting on her couch reading this fascinating article about sustainable building practices and environmentally conscious construction methods. I was thinking seriously about how maybe I could transition into green construction and start specializing in eco-friendly materials and sustainable building techniques. I had this entire business plan forming in my head, ideas about how to market myself effectively to environmentally conscious clients, ways to differentiate my services from the bigger, more established companies, strategies for building a niche that would be both profitable and meaningful. But when Maya started talking about how we wanted fundamentally different things from life, how we were heading in completely different directions with our futures, I just quietly closed the magazine and nodded in agreement. What would have been the point of arguing with her or trying to change her mind? She had clearly made her decision, and fighting it would only make everything more painful for both of us. She seemed genuinely relieved when I didn't fight her on the breakup or try to talk her out of it. Maybe she was expecting some big emotional scene, some desperate plea to work things out and give our relationship another chance. But honestly, I was kind of relieved too, even though it hurt to admit that to myself. It's absolutely exhausting being in a relationship with someone who doesn't respect what you do for a living, who sees your entire life as some kind of temporary stepping stone to something they consider better. I packed up my belongings methodically, gave her a sincere hug goodbye, told her honestly that I hoped she would find whatever it was she was looking for in life, and left her apartment for the last time. The funny thing is, I still genuinely hoped she would be happy and successful even after everything that had happened between us. Even after feeling judged and diminished for years, I wanted her to find whatever it was she thought she needed. I just knew with absolute certainty that what she was looking for wasn't me, and honestly, that realization was okay. I had accepted it and made my peace with it. I had my own building to do, my own life to construct, and my own dreams to pursue. Maya's life 8 years later. So here I am now at 31 years old, driving to meet Jessica for brunch in my Honda Civic that's definitely seen better days, listening to my daughter Zoe sing some completely made-up song about unicorns in the back seat. My daughter is 4 years old now, all blonde curls and endless, fascinating questions about everything we pass on the road during our drives together. "Why is that building so tall, Mommy?" she asks, pressing her face against the window. "Where do all the cars go when we're not looking? Can we get pancakes shaped like hearts today?" Her curiosity is endless and pure, and these moments in the car with her are some of my favorites, even when I'm stressed about everything else in my life. Sometimes I wonder if her father ever thinks about her. But honestly, I've completely stopped caring about his involvement or lack thereof. He sends us exactly 180 every month like clockwork, which is the bare minimum required by the court system, and that's about all the involvement I can handle from him anyway. It's better this way, cleaner, with fewer complications and disappointments. On paper, my life looks like I'm absolutely killing it professionally. I'm a senior advertising manager now with a corner office that has a beautiful view of the ocean. My salary would have completely blown my 24-year-old mind when I was just starting out in my career. It sounds like so much money when I tell people the number until you actually try to live on it in Florida with a child and realize how quickly it disappears. After taxes, I'm bringing home about $300 each month, which should theoretically be plenty for a comfortable life, right? That's exactly what everyone says when I mention that money is still tight despite my professional success. You make good money, they tell me. How can you possibly be struggling financially? Well, let me break down the harsh reality for you, because the numbers tell a very different story than my job title suggests. Daycare for Zoe costs me $1,650 every single month, which is literally more than most people pay for rent. But somehow, that's just what quality childcare costs these days if you want your kids somewhere safe and educational. My apartment runs $200 monthly, and before you ask whether I've looked at cheaper places, yes, I absolutely have. The problem is that they're either in neighborhoods where I wouldn't feel safe walking around at night, let alone raising a small child, or they're so far from my job that I'd end up spending half my salary on gas and extended daycare fees because of the commute time. My student loans have finally been whittled down to $100 per month, which feels like real progress until you realize that I've been paying them faithfully for 9 years already and still have 4 more years to go. It's like a mortgage payment for an education that's supposed to have improved my life, but sometimes feels more like an anchor. So after I pay for the big 3 expenses, childcare, housing, and student loans, I have about $1,270 left for absolutely everything else in our lives. That has to cover groceries, gas, car maintenance, health insurance copays, clothes for a kid who grows out of everything every 7 months, and the occasional dinner out that doesn't involve chicken nuggets and a playground. It's not poverty, and I'm very aware that I'm more fortunate than many people. But it's definitely not the comfortable, financially secure life I thought good money would buy me when I was in college, dreaming about my future career success. The loneliness is probably the worst part of my current situation, and I don't just mean the dating challenges, though that's certainly its own nightmare when you're 31 with a toddler and significant trust issues from past relationships. I mean the relentless, everyday loneliness of being the only adult responsible for absolutely everything, all the time, with no backup or support system. When Zoe gets sick, I'm the one who has to figure out whether it's serious enough to warrant an urgent care visit or if we can wait until her regular pediatrician has an opening. When my car makes some weird noise that wasn't there yesterday, I'm Googling automotive symptoms at midnight while simultaneously calculating whether I can afford an unexpected mechanic visit this month without completely destroying my budget. When the dishwasher starts leaking water all over my kitchen floor, I'm watching YouTube repair videos at 1 in the morning, trying to determine if it's something I can fix myself with basic tools or if I need to call a professional. Calling someone means taking time off work, which means explaining to my boss why I need to leave early again, which adds another layer of stress to an already complicated situation. Dating at 31 with a 4-year-old child is like trying to solve an incredibly complex puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the other half don't seem to fit together no matter how you arrange them. The guys who are actually interested in dating someone with a child are usually divorced fathers with kids of their own, which means trying to coordinate date nights around custody schedules that make coordinating a space shuttle launch look simple by comparison. The guys without children either run for the hills the moment they discover I have a daughter, or they stick around just long enough to realize they're not actually ready to become a stepdad to someone else's toddler. Can you really blame them for that reaction? If I'm being completely honest with myself, I probably wouldn't want to date me either given all the complications and responsibilities that come with my life. Sometimes, usually late at night when I'm doing the dishes and Zoe is finally asleep and the apartment is quiet, I find myself thinking about all the choices that led me to this exact point in my life. I think about the men I dated, the jobs I took, the priorities I set, and how the life I thought I wanted when I was 25 compares to the one I actually built for myself. But then morning comes with all its immediate demands, and there's breakfast to make, and a little girl who needs me to be strong and present and capable. So I push those reflective thoughts away and focus on what comes next in our day. Today, it's brunch with Jessica and pretending that I have my life completely together. Tomorrow, it's another day of being the responsible adult, whether I feel emotionally ready for that role or not. Derek's life 8 years later. Saturday mornings have become my absolute favorite time of the week now. I'm sitting on the front porch of my house, this beautiful 4-bedroom place that Carmen and I bought together 3 years ago, drinking coffee that's actually still hot because I finally have the luxury of time to sit and enjoy it properly. The front yard has become my personal showcase, obviously featuring all native plants and drought-resistant landscaping that looks like it belongs in a high-end home and garden magazine, but actually requires almost no maintenance once you understand what you're doing. I designed the entire layout myself and used it as a calling card for potential clients when I was first starting Ecoscape construction and needed to demonstrate my capabilities. Carmen is inside the house making waffles for breakfast, probably singing along to whatever podcast she's got playing in the kitchen. She does that when she's cooking, this unconscious, melodic humming that used to drive her crazy when I first pointed it out to her, but now I absolutely love listening for it because it means she's happy and content. Rex, our golden retriever, is sprawled dramatically across the driveway like he owns the entire property, which honestly he kind of does at this point. We adopted him from a rescue organization about a year after we moved into the house, and Carmen jokes that he's our practice baby, but I think we're both genuinely ready for the real thing pretty soon. The landscaping business has grown beyond anything I ever imagined when I first started dreaming about working for myself. It's doing significantly better than my old construction work ever did, both financially and in terms of personal satisfaction. I now have 9 full-time employees working for me, which means I spend less time actually building decks and pergolas with my hands, and more time managing schedules, coordinating with clients, and handling the business relationships that keep everything running smoothly. But I still make sure to get out there personally for the major installations, because there's something deeply satisfying about seeing a space transform from bare dirt and basic landscaping into something that will be beautiful and functional for decades to come. That transformation never gets old, no matter how many projects we complete. We're booked completely solid through next summer, which is an incredible problem to have. Most of our new business comes from word-of-mouth referrals from satisfied customers, which is exactly how I always wanted to build this company. There's something genuine and sustainable about growing a business based on the quality of your work, rather than expensive marketing campaigns or aggressive sales tactics. The money is genuinely good now, really good in a way that gives me financial security I never had as an employee. I'm pulling in solid profit margins after I pay my crew fair wages and cover all our equipment costs and business expenses. It's not just residential projects anymore either, which has opened up entirely new revenue streams for the company. We landed a significant contract with the city last year to completely redo the landscaping around the new community center, and there's serious talk of more municipal work coming our way if that project goes well. Having government contracts provides a level of stability and credibility that's been incredibly valuable for the business. Carmen is making excellent money as a nurse practitioner, so between the two of our incomes, we're more than comfortable financially. We're actually beyond comfortable. We can afford the mortgage payments, both our car payments, and we even take real vacations to places we actually want to visit every other year without worrying about the cost. The house itself represents everything I dreamed about when I was in my early 20s, doing trim work for other people and imagining what I would build for myself someday when I had the resources and opportunity. It's not huge or ostentatious, but it's solid with good bones and a layout that actually makes practical sense for how people live. I did most of the renovation work myself over the course of several months, which saved us probably $45,000 in contractor fees and allowed me to fix all the small details that would have driven me absolutely crazy if someone else had done them incorrectly. We have a completely new kitchen with high-end appliances, refinished hardwood floors throughout the main living areas, and a master bathroom that's bigger than my first apartment was. Carmen picked out most of the finishes and decorative elements because she has a much better eye for that kind of thing than I do, but I made absolutely sure that everything was installed correctly and built to last. All those years of construction work are finally paying off in my own home, where I can take pride in every detail. What I love most about our current situation is this profound feeling of permanence and belonging. This is genuinely our place, not somewhere we're renting temporarily until we figure out what comes next in our lives. The neighbors know us personally, and we know them. Mrs. Gonzalez next door brings us fresh mangoes from her tree every summer, and I help her grandson with his motorcycle whenever it starts acting up. When we walk Rex around the block in the evenings, people wave from their front porches and stop to chat about how business is going, remembering conversations we had months ago and showing genuine interest in our lives. It's the kind of authentic community connection that I didn't even know I wanted until I actually experienced it, and now I can't imagine living any other way. That's when I happened to notice a Honda Civic driving by unusually slowly, then pulling over and parking a few houses down from ours. It's not particularly unusual in our neighborhood because people tend to drive slowly here since there are always kids on bikes and families walking around, but something about this particular car caught my attention and made me look twice. Then the driver got out of the car, and I knew immediately even from a distance, and even after 8 years had passed since I'd last seen her. It was Maya. She had a little girl with her, probably around 4 years old, with beautiful blonde curls bouncing as she pointed excitedly at something down the street. As I watched them, I realized she was pointing directly at my house. I should have felt awkward or nervous about this unexpected encounter, but honestly, I was just genuinely curious about how life had treated her over the years. What were the chances of running into each other like this, especially in my own neighborhood? I stood up from my porch chair and walked toward the front gate with Rex trotting along beside me, tail wagging like he always does when there's the possibility of meeting new people. Maya looked good. Older, obviously, but still put together in that careful, intentional way she had always maintained. The little girl with her was absolutely beautiful, full of that pure energy and curiosity that 4-year-olds possess. I found myself genuinely happy to see Maya after all these years, simply wondering how life had unfolded for her, and hoping she had managed to find whatever it was she had been looking for when we parted ways. The unexpected encounter. So there I was, standing at Derek's front gate with Zoe tugging impatiently on my hand and asking if she could pet the big golden dog. Trying to act like running into my ex-boyfriend after 8 years was the most natural and casual thing in the world. My heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit, and I was desperately trying to process what I was seeing. The conversation started awkward but remained friendly, the way these unexpected encounters usually do when you're both trying to figure out exactly how much to reveal about your current life and how much to keep private or buried. I couldn't help but comment on his house because honestly, it was absolutely impossible to ignore how impressive it was. The landscaping was magazine-quality beautiful. The exterior paint looked fresh and professionally done, and everything about the property looked like it belonged in one of those home improvement shows that I watch late at night when I can't sleep, and find myself wondering how other people manage to create such perfect-looking lives. Derek just shrugged modestly when I complimented the house, and mentioned casually that he and his wife had bought it a few years ago, adding that he had done most of the renovation work himself over time. His wife. Of course he was married now. Of course he had personally renovated his own house. Of course everything in his life looked absolutely perfect from the outside. He asked what I was up to these days, and I told him about my recent promotion to senior advertising manager, mentioning the corner office and trying to make my professional life sound as successful and impressive as possible. He congratulated me warmly, and it sounded completely genuine rather than polite or like he was trying to prove he was over whatever had happened between us years ago. Then Derek mentioned his landscaping company almost casually, talking about it like it was no big deal to have 9 employees and commercial contracts with the city being booked solid for months in advance. I found myself doing rapid mental math, trying not to let my facial expression show exactly what I was thinking about the implications of what he was telling me. 9 employees doesn't mean he's just some guy with a pickup truck and a lawnmower working odd jobs around town. This represents a real, substantial business with payroll, insurance, commercial contracts, and the kind of overhead that indicates serious success. The numbers were starting to add up in ways that made me uncomfortable, but I tried to keep my expression neutral and conversational. We were both carefully dancing around the more personal aspects of our lives, focusing instead on safe topics like work achievements and how much the neighborhood had changed over the years. We talked about local development, new businesses, and the general growth of the area, all while avoiding the deeper questions about relationships, family situations, and how we had each processed the end of our time together. That's when a woman came out of Derek's house, and I knew immediately what I was looking at. She was blonde, naturally pretty in that effortless way that some people just possess without trying, wearing one of those loose, flowing tops that can only mean one thing when a woman is wearing it. She was very pregnant, obviously and beautifully pregnant in a way that radiated health and happiness. Derek introduced us with genuine warmth, and Carmen was immediately and authentically friendly toward me. It wasn't the fake, territorial kind of politeness you sometimes get when meeting your partner's ex-girlfriend, but actual warmth and openness. She asked if Zoe and I wanted to come inside for lunch, mentioning that she had just made way too much food, and that they always enjoyed having company over. I could see Zoe's eyes absolutely light up at the mention of food and the possibility of playing with the golden retriever, and for a brief moment I almost said yes to the invitation. The house looked so welcoming, and Carmen seemed so genuinely nice, and there was something appealing about spending time in a space that felt so stable and comfortable. But then I remembered that Jessica was expecting me for brunch, remembered that I was supposed to be somewhere else, living my own successful and well-organized life, instead of standing here staring at everything I didn't even know I had wanted. I declined the invitation politely, explaining that we already had plans for the day, which was technically true but sounded like a weak excuse even to my own ears. Carmen nodded understandingly and said, Maybe next time. Like there was actually going to be a next time, like we were going to become neighborhood friends now and have regular social interactions. The casual way she said it made it clear that she wasn't threatened by my presence or concerned about Derek's past relationships. The contrast between Carmen and me in that moment was so stark, it was almost comical. She was practically glowing with that pregnancy glow that people always talk about, but you don't really understand until you see it in person. She was standing confidently in front of this beautiful house, with her successful husband and their well-trained golden retriever, representing everything that looked like domestic happiness and financial security. Meanwhile, I was clutching my 4-year-old daughter's hand, trying not to let anyone see the mental calculations I was constantly doing about how much my life actually costs, compared to how much money I actually have available to spend. The difference between our circumstances was impossible to ignore, even though we were both being polite about not acknowledging it directly. We said our polite goodbyes without anyone exchanging phone numbers or suggesting that we should stay in touch, because what would really be the point of maintaining contact? We were clearly living in completely different worlds now, even though we were standing in the same neighborhood having a friendly conversation. I walked back to my Honda Civic feeling like I was moving through some kind of surreal dream, or maybe a nightmare where everything I thought I understood about success, ambition, and making smart life choices had been turned completely upside down and inside out. As I was driving away from Derek's perfect suburban Saturday scene, I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror of him walking back toward Carmen, with Rex bounding ahead of them like some kind of happy family commercial. In that brief moment, I realized with startling clarity that Derek had actually achieved everything I thought I wanted when I was 24 years old and planning out my ideal future. He had the beautiful house, the financial stability, the loving partnership with someone who clearly adored him, the successful business he had built from nothing, and no crushing student debt hanging over his head like a dark cloud. He owned his own company, was respected in his community, and had created exactly the kind of life I had imagined for myself when I was making all those careful career decisions and educational investments. And what exactly did I have to show for all my planning and ambition? I had a corner office and a salary that sounds impressive when you say the number out loud, but somehow never stretches far enough to cover the reality of actually living on it as a single mother in an expensive city. I spent so many years thinking that my college degree automatically meant something more valuable and important than Derek's hands-on skills and practical knowledge. I convinced myself that my career trajectory was somehow more meaningful or ambitious than his path, that choosing the college-educated route automatically made me smarter, more driven, and more deserving of a comfortable life. But sitting in traffic with Zoe, asking innocently why we couldn't stay for lunch at the nice house with the friendly dog, I found myself wondering if I had fundamentally confused credentials with actual character, if I had mixed up social status with real substance and value. The truth that I was finally forced to confront is that Derek had always been ambitious and driven. I just couldn't see it clearly because his ambition didn't look like the kind I thought mattered or counted as legitimate. He wanted to build something lasting and real, something that would take care of the people he loved and provide genuine security for his future family. And he actually did it. While I was busy climbing corporate ladders, networking at professional events, and optimizing my LinkedIn profile to project the right kind of success, Derek was methodically creating the exact life I thought my education and career focus entitled me to have. There's this concept called the college premium, the idea that people with degrees automatically do better in life financially and professionally than those without. But what if the premium isn't just about what you earn, but about what you actually get to keep after all your expenses? What if it's not only about your gross salary, but also about the debt you carry and the financial freedom you actually possess? What if real ambition isn't about the prestige level of your job title, but about the stability and security you can create for your life? What if success isn't measured by how impressive your career sounds to other people, but by how well your choices actually work for the life you want to build? I'm not saying that I regret everything about the path I chose. I genuinely love my daughter more than anything in the world, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished professionally despite all the challenges. I know that I'm strong enough and resourceful enough to handle whatever comes next in my life, and that's worth something significant. But driving home from Derek's perfect suburban Saturday morning, I couldn't stop myself from wondering what might have been different if I had been smart enough to recognize and appreciate what I actually had with him, instead of constantly chasing after what I thought I deserved based on my educational background and career expectations. What if I had been mature enough to see his work as valuable and respectable, instead of something I needed to defend or explain to my friends? What if I had recognized his practical skills and business instincts as genuine intelligence, instead of dismissing them because they didn't come with official academic credentials? The college premium that I had always believed in so strongly, the assumption that education automatically leads to better life outcomes, suddenly seemed like a much more complicated equation than I had ever realized when I was 24 and making decisions about my future based on what I thought success was supposed to look like.